Beautiful to have everybody here and to learn together. And so the theme of Chanukah is something that I like to look at this morning in the thought of Rav Kook, and I think we're going to see something very, very special, very unique to the thought of Rav Kook and the way that he sees the mitzvah of Chanukah and the mitzvah of lighting the menorah or the Chanukiah. And there's a story that I read recently. It's a story of Rabbi Moshe Twersky, Hashem Yinkom Damo. He was the eldest grandson of Rabbi Soloveitchik. Sadly, he was killed by a terrorist. The terrorist attack 10 years ago was the 10th anniversary, just a few weeks ago, of the terrorist attack. It was in a shul in Har Nov. If you remember, there were a group of rabbis that were killed that morning in the middle of davening, in the midst of their Amidah with their talis and tefillin on, and a terrorist came in and murdered. And one of those who were murdered was Rabbi Moshe Twersky. He was the eldest grandson of Rabbi Soloveitchik, Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik, and he was an outstanding Talmid Chacham himself. And there's a biography of his life that they put out after his passing. And his daughter said that the last thing that I remember my father saying is that it's 30 days, it's Shloshim Yom before Chanukah, and I need to begin to prepare with studying for Chanukah. Now it's interesting, there's a whole debate, that halacha, that 30 days in advance, what does it apply to? Everyone agrees that when it comes to the holiday of Chag HaPesach, that you need to do that. There's a lot of preparation. But we see that it was his minhag that he would study 30 days in advance, and that was a few days before he was murdered. So this idea of studying in advance and the hachana, the preparation that we do before a Yantif and even before Chanukah is something that's very, very special and very important, that it brings us into the Yantif and the celebration in a way that'll be even more meaningful. Okay. So with that, we can also be Mekayim this morning, this special mitzvah or minhag of, we're 2 weeks away, 2 weeks from this evening will be the first light of Chanukah. So I want to begin with a very well-known machloket, maybe one of the most well-known in the Gemara, and that is between Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai in the way that we light the menorah. And we're all familiar with this machloket, and I want to read it together with you. It's Daf Chaf Aleph in Shabbos. And the discussion of Chanukah finds its way into Masechet Shabbat. Now, why is that? Well, Masechet Shabbos is talking about Shabbos candles, the lighting for Shabbos. And once it gets into that discussion, as the Gemara often does, it then makes a turn, and it turns to Chanukah and the lighting of Chanukah. This is Daf Chaf Aleph, Amud Aleph, in Gemara Shabbos, the very first source on the sheet. Beit Shammai Omrim Yom Rishon Madlik Shmona. On the first night, according to Beit Shammai, what do? You put all 8 candles into or oil into your menorah, in your Chanukiah. Mikan ve'elach poches v'holech. And then you go down. You start with 8, then 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So that's Beit Shammai. Does anybody have that minhag? Anybody do that? I hope not. You're not supposed to do. You're not supposed to do that. We don't paskin like Beit Shammai. Beis Hillel says, Yom Rishon Madlik Echad, you start with 1 candle the first night, Mikan ve'elach Mosif v'holech, and then you continue to go up, to ascend to 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way till 8. The Gemara itself speaks about their reasoning, and you're probably familiar, maybe more familiar with the reason of Beis Hillel. But let's begin with Beit Shammai. It says, Time of the Beit Shammai, Keneged Parei Hachag. The reason why Beit Shammai says you start with 8 and you go downward, it's based on the sacrifices, the bulls, the parei hachag that were brought on Sukkot. Now that sounds like a far out reason, and we're going to look at that in a moment. What does one thing have to do with the other? What do sacrifices, and the sacrifices, the korbanot that were brought on Sukkot have to do with Chanukah? Okay, we'll put that aside for a moment. And v'taima de Beis Hillel, what's the reason of Beis Hillel? And I think many of us are familiar with this Gemara. Demalin b'kodesh ve'ein moridin. The famous line in the Gemara that we ascend in holiness. Malin b'kodesh, that we continue to go upward. And therefore, it makes sense that we should start with 1 and make our way all the way up to 8. We don't want to start with 8 and go to 1, as we would be morid b'kodesh. Okay. So where does Beit Shammai, and what we're going to look at for the next few minutes, is the analysis and the very beautiful elucidation of Beit Shammai's opinion. Now, when I heard it over the years, I always thought, like, that really doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. And to start with 8 and to go down to 1, and what is the reasoning behind that? It just seemed like something very foreign and very distant. It is foreign to us because it's not the way that we light the menorah. So we feel very comfortable with Beis Hillel's opinion. But what is Beit Shammai? What does he have in mind? So the question number 1 is, what is the relationship between Chanukah and Sukkot? I mean, he's making that comparison. He's actually making the suggestion that we should do something that is Sukkot-like, right? Something that they would do in the Beit HaMikdash on the holiday of Sukkot, that we should do it on Chanukah, and it should be reflected in the way that we light the menorah. So answer number 1, one possibility is the following. This is the Aruch HaShulchan, and he writes that year that they celebrated Chanukah, they came back to the Beit HaMikdash and they found the oil and they lit the menorah. There was a decree that the Jewish people were not allowed to celebrate Sukkot that year, that they missed out on celebrating Sukkot that year. Let me just read it to you inside, in the words of the Aruch HaShulchan. This is the opening of his halachot of Hilchos Chanukah. Tam lazeh, the reason why, and he's referring to the reason why we have 8 days. Now, if I ask you, why do we have 8 days? I think everybody would give the answer, well, we didn't have enough oil and it lasted for 8 days. And that's correct. But it's not so simple where that 8 days come from. Why couldn't they find other oil? What was the issue of waiting all those days for the oil? It's a little bit of a complicated question. But that's the basic answer that's given. That's our understanding, that they needed to wait the 8 days. But here we see an added component according to the Aruch HaShulchan. Tam lazeh mivar b'sefer Chashmonai, that we have what's called the Sefer Chashmonai, which is part of the writings that go back to the time of the Chashmonaim and the Maccabees. We have Sefer HaMaccabim as well. Lefisha al Yedei Hagzerot, or Hagzera, there was a Gezerah, there was a decree at that time, a Greek decree. Bitlu az milahakriv bechag hasukot ha'avar ubishmini atzera. They did not allow in the Beit HaMikdash any of the sacrifices and the celebration, the regular celebration of Sukkot and Shmini Atzeres. V'lachein lezichron zeh asu shmona yamim Chanukah. Interesting. I don't know if you've ever heard that before. This is in the Aruch HaShulchan. Says that that's where the 8 days is based on that, or somewhat grounded in that idea that they missed the 8 days of Sukkot and Shmini Atzeret, and they wanted now to celebrate 8 days. What we missed before, a few months earlier, we now want to celebrate that, and we're going to celebrate it with 8 days of Chanukah. Umemela keshera'u lahem min hashamayim hanes shel hadlaka, and when they saw this great miracle of the lighting, her'um she'iskimu ayadam la'asot shmona yamim, and they saw this connection. They saw, well, with this miracle that the oil lasted for 8 days, and this idea, the 8 days that we missed, it must be that we should be celebrating the 8 days of Chanukah as 8 days like Sukkot. So this is step number 1 in terms of maybe what Beit Shammai has in mind when he talks about that we should light the candles similar to the way that the korbanot were brought. Now, how were the korbanot brought? There were 70 korbanot, 70 parim that were brought, and every day there was a descent in number. So Beit Shammai is saying, let's do it the way that the korbanot were brought on Sukkot. The way that they descended in number, it started with 70 and it went downward. So too, we should do the same. Again, it still sounds a little surprising that Beit Shammai is making that equation. But now we see it's not so far out to make that equation. Now, what were those 70 parim? What did they represent? What were they all about? The 70 nations, beautiful. The 70 nations. That's what the Gemara says. Source number 4, the Gemara in Sukkah, Nun Hey Amud Beis, 55b, says, Amar Rabbi Elazar, Hani Shivim Parim Keneged Mi. Why did they have the 70 parim? Keneged Shivim Umot. Because the 70 nations of the world. That's why it's descending. Okay, so we're going to get to, well, why was it descending? Why was it descending? So one way of looking, and we're going to see that in a moment, Rav Kook is going to take a different interpretation. Why do you say, why are they descending? Why descending in number? What do you say? Why? To get to the Jews. Right. Yeah, okay. Maybe to get to the Jews. Anybody else? Why would it be a descending number? Decreasing power. Very good. Okay, decreasing power. I think that's how most understand it. That is decreasing power of the nations of the world. However, what are these korbanot? What do they reflect? That we are praying on behalf. What does it mean to bring the korbanot for the nations of the world? It means that we're praying on their behalf. We're bringing korbanot on their behalf. We're praying for the blessing for the nations of the world. That's what Sukkot is all about. Sukkot is about a celebration of coming to Yerushalayim, coming to Israel, the long journey. Those are the Sukkot, this journey in the wilderness. We've come to Israel. And now that we're in the land of Israel, not only are we concerned with ourselves, but we're going to bring 70 bulls. We're going to bring 70 korbanot, each one representing the nations of the world, and to pray on their behalf. Okay. Now, what does that have to do with Chanukah, and what is this idea of descending order? Now we go to Rav Kook. Rav Kook gives the following beautiful, very beautiful explanation. And let me say a word of it sort of as a preface, and then we'll see the words of Rav Kook, the writings of Rav Kook, which we always like to see the actual language of Rav Kook. Rav Kook says that descending number is not something negative about the nations of the world, it's actually something very positive. And that is the descending number represents that the nations will become more and more unified until we are all one. That the Jewish people and the nations of the world, that we can think of ourselves as one great people, that all of us together believe in one God and believe in the divine mission, the divine law. Now, it could be that there's a difference between the nations and us. There is a very big difference. We have 613 commandments. The nations of the world have how many commandments? They have 7. No, they have 7. So that's the Chiddush. That is the Chiddush. The Chiddush is that the nations of the world are not 0. I think we're brought up with that idea that the nations of the world are 0. We're the great nation, and everybody else isn't so great, is a 0. No, it's not 0. We have 613 commandments. They also are in the world of commandments as well. The ideal is that every non-Jew, that every Gentile has 7 mitzvot b'nei Noach, that they have 7 laws as well. And they use that, the same word is used, mitzvah, we have mitzvot. Did you ever think about the idea? And Gentiles have mitzvot as well. We have mitzvot and Gentiles have mitzvot, the same word. Sheva, mitzvot. It doesn't say 7 recommendations for the nations, right? 7 good things for them to do, commandments that they have as well. So we are sharing commandments with them. We're sharing the same God with them. And that's what it means, the diminishing number. The diminishing number of korbanot means that all of us are going to get closer and closer to one another until we are one people. Now, I'm not suggesting it means that they're becoming Jewish. We don't proselytize. That's not the messianic vision for everyone to become a Jew. But the messianic vision is, Bayom Hahu, Yeh Hashem Echad U'Shmo Echad, that on that day, on that great day, that everyone is going to know one God. Everyone's going to believe in one God. Everyone's going to know the ethics and morality of the Torah. Everyone's going to live by those standards. That's the goal, and that's what those parim represent. Now, let's see the words of Rav Kook. Let's see the words of Rav Kook. And Beit Shammai, and just getting back to Beit Shammai just for a moment, so what does he see? What does he see in the lights, the menorah? That these lights represent this message as well, and there's a message here that we want to bring the light to all nations of the world. Just like those parim, right? Just like those sacrifices that represent a unity, a descending number that brings us all together, so too when we place the menorah on our windowsill, or we'll talk about where it really should be, we place it outside of our homes for everyone to see. Beit Shammai says, I want that message to be a message that there's light and there's wisdom and caring for all humanity. We don't think of Shammai that way necessarily. Now we have to work out why Beit Hillel doesn't like that. We'll see that in a moment. But that's the way that Rav Kook understands Beit Shammai, which is a very, very beautiful idea. Let's see the language of Rav Kook. This is Ein Hayah. Ein Hayah, as we've spoken about, that's Rav Kook's commentary on the Agadah. He wrote on Brachot and Shabbos, so luckily we have his commentary on these Gemaras, which are all about Chanukah. So we have a lot of nice material from Rav Kook because he's commenting on all the material of Chanukah. Where does all the material of Chanukah appear in the Gemara? There isn't a separate tractate. We have just in Gemara Shabbos itself. Okay. Yesh megamatam shel Yisrael. There is a goal, there is a purpose amongst the Jewish people, l'chazot, that we have a great vision, B'tikun olam b'malchut shakai. That we have this great vision. We spoke about this a few weeks ago. We have a great vision, and we end every davening with this. I don't know if you ever took note of it. It's the way that we end. It's like our battle cries. We're about to enter, as we leave the shul and enter regular life. The Aleinu, we say, we have this great vision of a tikkun olam, that the entire world, we're going to get it right. There's going to be a tikkun b'malchut shakai, that all will know the kingdom of God. Ubehasot kol habruim aguda echat. What does that mean? And that all of God's creations, that we become, interesting, when we say aguda echad, we usually think about, what is that? Does that conjure up any good? We think about, also, it's Sukkot. We talk about the aguda, actually, the aguda of the Arba Minim. That's called an aguda as well. And it's interesting that's a word around Sukkot. But here he talks about an aguda achat. I'm sorry, be'asod kol habruim aguda achat. How do you translate that? All of what? That right, Bru'im, all of God's creations, all of humanity. There's a vision of a oneness of all humanity. Agudah Echad. What's that? United Nations. Okay, I don't know about that, but Lahavdil. Alfei Abdallahs. So, Agudah Achas, Lechaye Tzedek, that we all want to live a life of righteousness. That's for everyone. Ba'or Hashem, there's a light of God for everyone. Everyone has a neshama. Everyone is created, all of humanity. Where does Torah begin? Torah begins with Adam and Chava, not with a Jew. So the vision of the Torah is a vision for all people. Muchan adavar ki riboy hatzivyonot. And what will happen? That all of the different distinctiveness in all the nations, sheba le'umim, shigorem chalukotam le'amim rabim, that we have so many nations and the differences between all the nations of the world, yelchu holech v'hi ma'ed, they will diminish. In other words, all the differences that we have, yes, we have, everyone is unique, but in terms of a understanding of God, in terms of ethics, in terms of morality, in terms of Sheva Mitzvah B'nai Noach, and our mitzvot, that we can all be together in that. Kol mashi yosif or ha'emet v'chayat tzedek le'ofiyah, the more that there's the light of godliness, then there's going to be more understanding and a greater unity of all nations. Ki kol sheyoter yitkarvu ha'amim l'tchunat chayei ha'torah, the more that the other nations of the world learn about the ideals of the Torah, Elokit, Kain yitma'et perudam utzivyonam. So in that way, there'll be less differences between the nations. In other words, the goal is, the ideal is for all the nations of the world to all be in agreement with the basic foundations of morality and ethics, which is taught by the Torah, the 10 Commandments. And I think, by the way, a lot of the world does buy into many of those ideals. But the goal of the Jew and of the Jewish people, and that's how he begins, the Migamatam Shel Yisrael. What is our ultimate goal? What's the ultimate vision for Am Yisrael? It's not only that we're going to have a Torah and know the great light of God, but something that we can spread to all mankind. Al Kain ba haremez. Therefore, that is what's hinted here. Yom Rishon Madlik Shmona. The Shmona candles represent the different nations of the world. Mikan ve'elach pochet ve'holech. But it diminishes. Those differences diminishes until there's one candle at the very end. And the one candle at the very end represents a unity of all. A unity of all nations, our nation, the nation of Israel, together with the nations of the world. Again, I'm not suggesting that we're the same. We are different. 613 we have, 7 mitzvot they have, but we're all together in the mitzvah, right? We're all together in that same community of mitzvot. And that's the goal. That's the ultimate goal. And that's the way that he understands Beit Shammai. Those are the parim that diminish every single day. And the candles that are diminishing with that idea that the menorah represents a wholeness, a unity, a oneness of all of the nations, our nation together with everyone else. Now, Beit Hillel disagrees with that. Beit Hillel disagrees. And look at the way that Rav Kook understands the opinion of Beit Hillel. Beit Hillel omrim, she'omnam yesh te'udah kazot Yisrael. Even though, yes, there is that vision and that goal of the Jewish people to bring our light and to bring the wisdom of the Torah to all nations, aval hachayim hayoter gvoim. But this more elevated life, she omek kavanat Torah, which is the very essence of the purpose of Torah, behachanata et Yisrael lemalatan. that when it comes down to it, Beit Hillel says, no, we still need to emphasize that the Torah makes our people, our nation, different than other nations of the world. We're still going to be, at the end of the day, we're going to be greater than all the nations, and that's something that we need to emphasize, and therefore we move upwards. Eino rak b'shvil liot klei shimush la'olam kulo. We're not just here to be a apparatus, a tool to bring others closer to the Torah. That we are to be the Am Skula, that we're going to be above the highest of all the nations of the world, and therefore he disagrees with that opinion of Beit Shammai. That is the interpretation of Rav Kook, understanding Beit Shammai. I'll share the following, which is interesting. This is a Kabbalistic idea. It does not appear in the Talmud. It appears in the writings of the Arizal and the students of the Arizal. It's found in the Tanya, the writings of Shner Zalman Liadi. Have you ever heard the following statement, that in the time of the Mashiach, everything that we followed from Beit Shammai, we will no longer follow, and we will follow the opinion of Beit Hillel that we've been following. We'll no longer follow Beit Hillel. We'll follow all the rulings of Beit Shammai. You've heard that? In a messianic time, this is found in the Kabbalah, that everything that we're doing, like Beit Hillel for all these years, it's all going to turn around. We're going to follow Beit Shammai. So it's interesting. Again, there are different interpretations what that means, but this idea that this Beit Shammai approach of this oneness and this unity, again, it's a little bit hard to take that in. It's not how we've been brought up. It's not how we think about the Jewish people. We think more of the Beit Hillel approach, but we need that. That's a messianic idea. It's an idea that maybe we're not grasping right now. It's not as easy. Maybe we're not ready for that yet. But maybe that's a messianic idea. This idea, again, the nations are not a zero. The nations are Sheva Mitzvah B'nai Noach. And we're together with them in that recognition of God and service of God. Okay, that's step one. Step number two now is another piece from from Rav Kook about Beit Shammai and about this idea of where we put the menorah. Now, growing up, so we all went to the living room, we had a windowsill, we placed it on the windowsill. How many people did that inside their home? How many people lit outside their home, the menorah outside their home growing up? Okay, so nobody did that, and the Rambam and all of the early halakhic sources talk about not having it outside, but having it inside the home. However, the Gemara says that the right place to put it, and the way that they enacted the law, is that the menorah should be placed on the outside. What we've been doing for all of us growing up is really not the ideal. It's not the right place for menorah. The Rambam, yeah, so I'm going to read it to you right now. Here we go, the top of page 2. The Rambam writes, this is from Hilchos Chanukah. The Rambam says, this is Perek Daled, and the top of page 2. We're looking at Hilchos Chanukah from the Rambam, the Mishnah Torah. Ner Chanukah, when you light the Chanukah candles, mitzvah la'anicho al petach beito mi bachutz. So where does it go? What is the halacha, the basic halacha? Where does the menorah go? Where do you place it? Outside at the front of your home. That's the halacha. That's what the Gemara says. That's what the Rambam says. So why, when we grew up in LA and Baltimore and New York and Muncie, why did we not put it there? Okay, no, some say that, by the way, that it was just too snowy and too difficult to be outside. So let's read on in the Rambam. So Ner Chanukah mitzvah lanicho al petach beito mi bachutz betevach hasamuch lepetach. It should be right near a tefach. It should be right near the entrance of the door. Al smol. It should be on the left side, hanichnas lebayit, the way that you enter the house. On the left side as you're entering the house. Kidei shetia mezuzah biyamin. The mezuzah on the right side, and the Chanukah, v'ner Chanukah mismol. That's the halacha in the Rambam. It should be at the doorway. On the right side, you have the mezuzah. On the left side, you have the ner Chanukah. The Gemara says you're surrounded by mitzvot every time that you enter the door. But he writes the following. This is halacha chet. That's halacha zayin. The next halacha, bimei sakana. But in times of sakana, where it's dangerous, meniach adam ner Chanukah betoch beito mi bifnim. You bring it inside the house, vafilu Heinichu al shulchano dayo. And if you put it on a table, that's sufficient. The Rambam never talks about actually putting it in the window. He just says, bring it inside in times of sakana. So why is it that we do not have the menorah on the outside? It seems clear that the issue was sakana. The Jews did not feel that it was safe, that there was anti-Semitism. They did not feel that it was safe. Imagine going back to the shtetl and have fire right in front of your home with everybody that is around. Okay, good. So it seems that we found like a compromise. In other words, we brought it inside. We still wanted to have the Pirsumei Nisa. And where we felt comfortable doing that, we brought it to the window because that is the idea that others should see it. But interesting, the Rambam just says we bring it inside. It's times of sakana. Yes? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. No, it came up in the last couple of years in New York where there was a lot of anti-Semitism a year or two ago. There was a whole question. People were concerned about putting it in the window. I was thinking about Melbourne, Australia, where the shul was firebombed. And I'm not sure if in that community, if people are going to be comfortable putting the menorah in the window itself. Yes, please. Very good. So that's the big question. We're going to see that in a moment. The Pirsumei Nisa, and we all know that when it comes to Chanukah, that it's about publicizing the miracle, right? It's unique. It's unique halacha. We don't have that. We don't have matzah. You don't have to put on your front door. You don't have to hang in the window, and we eat it inside our home. And the sukkah doesn't. It can be wherever it is. There's a halacha here of Pirsumei Nisa that others need to see it. Others needs to see the miracle. Now, who is that geared for? Well, you can already guess what Rav Kook is going to say, and we'll see it in a moment. Is it just geared for your fellow Jew? Or do we have an idea that our light needs to spread and we need to share it with all the nations? That everyone needs to see the light of God. Everyone needs to recognize the miracle, the power of Hashem. Yes, did you have a comment?
The same logic would apply to the mezuzah. If you don't take the mezuzah inside, you leave it exposed outside.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah, it's a very interesting point. The mezuzah also is on the outside. Yes.
Well, that's how people take it away nowadays.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I listened to a shir just the other day. Rav Asher Weiss, I've mentioned that name. He's considered one of the great poskim in the world today. So he said, well, what is my minhag in terms of lighting? Where do I light? So he says, I grew up my entire life. He's a chassid. He's a Kloisenberger chassid, a Talmud of the Kloisenberger Rabbi. And the custom in his chasidus was to light it inside, actually not to light in the window. In his chasidus, it was just to light. And again, you can now understand why. That it wasn't even to put in the window. So he says, that's what I grew up with. That was my Rebbe's custom. And here I am in Eretz Yisrael, and I know the Gemara, and I know the Rambam, and it says that it should be outside. So what do I do? Right? He does both. That's what he says. So he has one at the entrance. He makes a bracha, and he lights a second menorah inside. You can light as many menorahs as you like, without a bracha, of course. If you want to fill your house with menorahs and light 100 menorahs, you can do it. So he lights one for this mitzvah, the mitzvah which is really the right way of doing it. This is the correct way, the Shulchan Aruch. Everybody says, where does the menorah go? It goes on the outside. It's only mishum sakana. It's only because we lived in places where we were not comfortable, where we were scared, where it was dangerous, where there's anti-Semitism. And by the way, this time of year, around Christmas time, was a very dangerous time. This year, Chanukah, it comes out the same day. So you have to take that into account as well, what's happened over the last 2,000 years for the Jewish people. You know, there's a minhag not to go to a shul or to learn the night of Kratzmas. Do you know that? There's a minhag that many have. Why? It was too dangerous to go out that night. It was too dangerous to go out that evening. That's right. Very good. And there's a whole question about learning that night, that you don't even learn that night. Why wouldn't you learn that night? Because it was a reminder, don't go to shul. Don't leave your home. So this, again, we're in a different, Baruch Hashem, look at how we're living today. We don't even think about this, but this was the life of Jews for thousands of years. So yes, the menorah should be outside. It should be at the very entrance, but we brought it inside. So you can think about for yourselves how you want to light the menorah. And I adopted that, by the way, so in my home also. So I didn't do it my whole life until I moved to Israel. I'm reading this, and I hear where we should do it, so I light at the entrance. And we also light inside as well. We do both. I do outside and my kids do in, so we do a combination. Okay, so let's look at Rav Kook. Rav Kook is going to talk about this halacha and what this means. This is from Mama Rei HaRa'aya. It's a collection of articles and pieces that Rav Kook wrote. And he writes about this minhag of having it on the outside. Bi'itim normaliyot. What does the Hebrew word normaliyot mean? Normal. So in times that are normal, in regular times, in good times, hinenu margishim b'kirbenu omet shel hachraza pumbit. We know that we have a message that we want to publicize to the world. We have forgotten that. We have forgotten in the galut, in this exile, that that's part of our mission, maybe one of the most important parts of our mission. We haven't spoken about that. We've just spoken about keeping Shabbos and not saying Lashon Hara and Shatnez, and we should be doing those things, but we haven't heard this message. We have forgotten this message that as a Jew and as a Jewish people, we have great wisdom and a great light to share with others. Not only do we're obligated to do that. We're obligated to do that. So at good times and in normal times, this is what a Jew does. Yedu kol ba'ei olam, that all the people of the world, all of humanity, hamitalchim ba'artzot hachayim, that are walking in the lands of life, ki or olam lanu, that we have a special light. Umeitanu karnayim lahanhir bahem ve'al yadam eretz v'chutzot, that we have the karnayim, we have rays of light. We have the glory. A karen means both a light, a ray. It also means the glory. We have a special glory, and we know that we have it. We have something very special, and we should have that confidence and celebrate that. But it's not only for ourselves, it's for the entire world. Mitzvah ner Chanukah, and here we go. I don't know if you ever thought about Chanukah candles in this way. And what is the mitzvah ner Chanukah? Hasemel hakadosh hazeh. It's a symbol of this kedusha of the Jewish people, and a kedusha that we are to share with others. Hi lehanicha al petach beito mibachutz. Not inside the house. Inside the house means what? It's for us. It's for our family. It's for our kids. That's inside the house. But if you're bringing it outside the house, and that's what the rabbi said, that's what the Gemara says. The Gemara, the Rambam, everyone says it needs to be outside the house. If it's outside the house and Persume Nisa, who is it for? It's for Jews also, and we need to spread that message to other Jews. Right? There are a lot of Jews that don't know that much about Judaism, so absolutely right. But it's not only for Jews. If we're bringing it out, it's not in the shul, right? It's not in the house, it's outside. It's by the street where everybody is walking by. It's for everybody to learn that message. Ba'et asher hanara hamikudeshet mofia hi gam mibachutz, ein anu tzrichim lid'og. So where it's outside, we have nothing to worry about. This is the message that we can bring to others. Kvar yodim anu bituchim, ash hapanim hu malei ora, tama ki tov sachra lo yichba b'layla neira. So that is the light that we are to spread to others. And then the Rambam writes the following. This is the last paragraph of this piece. He says, Umital chermon hayored al harei Tzion yitzaveh Hashem et habracha. This is a pasuk from Tehillim, and you have it in the last paragraph. I have it translated here, right below. And from the dew of Chermon descending upon the mountains of Zion, the Lord will command the blessing. And I'll just read it. Let's read it in the translation below. To Israel and mankind, as it says, and I will pour out for you immeasurable blessing from Malachi. All the children will return together to sing from the bottom of their hearts and souls. This is my portion for all of my labor. The nation of Israel lives and shall live forever. May the dangerous storm pass quickly so that we may return to the precept of the Chanukah lamp to its rightful place, to light it on the outside of our doorways, and all the ends of the earth shall see the salvation of our Lord upon his people and his inheritance. So here, Rav Kook is saying two things. We need to put the menorah in its right place again. We should be lighting on the outside, but that's like the technical halakha. But what is that symbolic of? What does that represent? It represents that now, after a long time of being in the galut, not only can we do this mitzvah properly, have the menorah on the outside of our home, but we can take on the great mission that we've lost or we've forgotten it. I would say we haven't lost or forgotten it so much. We have not been able to do it. What does it mean in Nazi Germany that we as Jews have a message for our neighbors, right? For the people. What does that even? What does that mean? There's nothing to talk about. But or jihadists. But once we come back, Rav Kook believes, once we come back to the land of Israel, we can now do this. 7 million strong, a strong army, a great economy, a great people. We can now be that light, as Isaiah says, Yeshayahu says, or la goyim, that same word, or la goyim. We are a light. And what is the menorah? The menorah is the light to the nations. There's only one holiday of the year that took place and celebrates the land of Israel. There's no other holiday that took place and celebrates the land of Israel. Pesach was getting out of Egypt. Shavuos in the Midbar getting the Torah. Sukkot, making our way through the wilderness. Purim, where does it happen? Persia, outside the land of Israel. Actually, the Gemara itself says you don't say Hallel because it happened outside the land of Israel. There's only one holiday that happened in Eretz Yisrael and celebrates Eretz Yisrael and celebrates the Beit HaMikdash, and that is Chanukah. And Chanukah, the vision is coming back to Israel, rebuilding this light that we have of the Jewish people that we can now spread from the land of Israel to the nations of the world. So Rav Kook says we can do this now. Let's bring the menorah to the front of our home, but it's more than just, technically buy that box, 150 shekel, and put it in the front of our home. It's about thinking of our Judaism differently and our place in this world, that we have a message and we can uplift the world, we can change the world, we can inspire the world. That's what we're here for. So Hanukkah is more than just a little bit of chocolate gelt and playing with a dreidel and sufganiyot. There's the biggest idea of Judaism, this grand idea of who are we as Jews and who are we as a people, and what can we do to change the world, to bring God into the world, to bring morality to the world. That's what that menorah, what that light is all about. Take it out of your home, bring it, share it with everyone. Yes?
Would you say that people now live in so many high-rise buildings, the window is more...
Yeah, okay. So now we're getting, so that's a technical halacha, yes. So many say if you're in a high-rise building, better. But interesting, let's say if you go to the old city, and I recommend doing that over Hanukkah, to walk around the old city, it's very beautiful. You'll see at the entrance of the apartments, you'll see 10, 15, 20 menorahs all there, meaning nobody's lighting in their apartments. They're all lighting at the entrance of their apartment. And that's the minhag. And the minhag is, and they're following this minhag of lighting at the doorway, that it needs to be on the outside. It's not their mirpaset. No, it's not their mirpaset. They could put on their mirpaset. They could put it in a window, but they're all putting it there. And you'll see, again, every one of the apartments lighting there. So you've probably seen pictures, or you've seen it, where there's 10, 15, 20, all lined up at the entrance of the apartment building. Yes, please.
Is this teaching by example an exception to not teaching Torah today?
So now you're getting into a very good question, a more technical question. That is, how do we do it? Right? How are we supposed to? What do we teach? What can we teach to non-Jews? So I'm not going to address. I don't know the answer to that, and that's a different conversation of what it is exactly. Again, we're talking in very general terms that we have this mission of bringing Torah to the world. What does that mean exactly? How do we do that? So we'll leave that aside for a moment. One way of doing that is to model it. And I've always said that. In other words, when a teacher or somebody told me what to do, right, you want to do just the opposite. As soon as they tell you, this is what you're required to do, this is what I'm asking of you, so it's already, that's already the Yetzer Hara says, I don't want to listen to this. So it may not be so much about us telling people about Judaism, it's more about modeling Judaism. When the world will see the beauty of our society, of the way we treat one another, of our hospitals, of our offices, of our police department, of our government, when the world will see the beautiful way that we interact with one another and the chesed, and they'll see a world that they don't see anywhere else, they'll say that's the light, that's the kind of, not that I want to be Jewish, but that's the life that I want to live. I want to live in that kind of harmony, of that kind of love. Right, I want that and that's part of what this means, to be a light to the nations. How could we do that in Gullus? We're all just trying to survive. We're all living in our little communities, just trying to make it, just to hold on to our Judaism. Yes. Yeah. Okay, good. And I mentioned this we were actually talking about the same topic a few weeks ago. If you go to the Kotel, you go and there's a Chabad guy standing at the tefillin stand. You can do this today. as you walk down to a man, they'll say, have you put on tefillin? Are you Jewish? Are you Jewish? And do you want to put on tefillin? If you say, I'm Jewish and I don't want to put on tefillin, they'll just, they'll take you by the arm and they will put a pair of tefillin on you. But if you say you're not Jewish, so they're not going to put on a pair of tefillin, but they do hand you a card with the Sheva Mitzvah B'nai Noach. They hand you a card with the Sheva Mitzvah B'nai Noach and says, this is for you. This is what you need to learn. This is what you need to learn more about. So there you have, so actively, and by the way, interesting, the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, he believed in this. He was one of the first to talk about this in Brooklyn, in America, that we need to do more in terms of spreading the goodness of Judaism, the wisdom of Judaism. Again, we're not converting anyone, but we have, and again, he saw this, which is quite amazing, and Rav Kook is talking about this as well. They both feel that we're moving towards the redemption. And as we're getting close to redemption, this is what Judaism, this is what our people is about. Again, we haven't been talking about it. It's not something that I grew up with, this message. Yes, please. Please. They do it outside. Yeah, there are people doing it, by the way. There are people in Chutzar. If you go to Muncie, there are more and more people that are doing it by their doorway. So there are people that do this. Yes. Yes, absolutely right. Absolutely right. Which, by the way, is very interesting. As I just mentioned a moment ago, here you have the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who's very, very sensitive to this idea. Where does he is the first to come up with this idea. Where's a menorah? A menorah is in your house or in the front of your house. What do you mean a menorah in the mall? Like to bring a big menorah to a mall. There's nowhere in halacha where menorah goes into like the public square. Again, it's ner ishu beso, it's your house. Okay, we have this issue where in the house, ideally in the front of the house, but nobody ever spoke about put a menorah just, in a public place. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe came up with this idea. Why did he come up with this idea? One, for Jews, so many Jews, but I think he also has this idea as well, that the menorah is a message. We want everyone to see it. We want non-Jews to see it as well and to learn and to be inspired by the Jewish people. Yes?
Modern Judaism is that this whole idea of Orla Goyim has substituted by many people as our raison d'etre.
Okay. Now you make an interesting point. You do make an interesting point, where some of the other movements kind of took this as a central teaching of Tikkun Olam, and they kind of put aside the other part of Judaism, which is all of the mitzvot and all of our singularity and uniqueness. So that is true. But the ideal is both. The ideal is, again, we are a great people because of our mitzvot and how we share that light. Exactly how we do that. There are many rabbis talking about it today for the very first time. As I said, rabbis were not talking about this because it was just not in the cards. It was not a possibility. You're sitting in Eastern Europe, you're sitting in Spain, you're sitting wherever it was, running from one country to the next. We weren't talking about how do we do this. Rabbis are talking about it today in Israel. How do we fulfill this? What are the parameters of what does it mean? What is the halachic obligation? If they're supposed to keep Sheva Mitzvah B'nai Noach, well, how are they supposed to know about it? Okay, good. So that is, yes, please. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So they're basically morality. I mean, all of them relate to it's morality, and it's essentially a reflection of the Ten Commandments. Yeah, missing three. I'm not sure. I'm not. Okay. Let's look at. I'm just looking at the time, and let's look at two. Let's turn to page 3. And I want to share with you something that we say every day in the Amidah. So something that we can also take away as a takeaway, something that we can bring to our kavana as we daven. So we have a bracha for the rebuilding of Yerushalayim. V'li Yerushalayim ircha barachamim tashuv. So it's the only bracha that we have in the Amidah. It's okay. It's the only bracha that we have in the Amidah that begins with a letter Vav, other than Vilamalshinim. So in other words, there's a connection between the previous paragraph and this paragraph, right? Now we have Vilamalshinim, that's an added, and kind of makes sense that there would be a Vav there because that's an added tefillah, added to the 18, that's the 19th. But this is the only bracha that we have that there's a Vav, meaning that there's a relationship between the previous bracha and this bracha. What do we say in the previous bracha? Ala tzadikim ve'ala chasidim. It's a prayer for tzadikim, the righteous, ve'al ziknei amcha be'Yisrael, ve'al pleita sofreihem, the elders, ve'al geirei hatzedek ve'aleinu. Interesting, by the way, that we have a bracha that in which we're praying for righteous converts, those that convert to Judaism. I teach a class one night a week of converts. The Rabbinical Council of America, the RCA, has a program here for non-Jews, for Gentiles who are studying for conversion, English-speaking, Americans and from other countries that are studying for conversion here in the land of Israel. So I think about this when, of all things to say, of a bracha that we're thinking about converts to Judaism, which is interesting, that converts, that we have a special bracha for them, al geirei hatzedek, yemu rachamecha Hashem Elokeinu, that you should have special rachamim, v'tein sachar tov l'chol habotchim b'shimcha be'emet, that you should give special schar to those that believe in you, v'sim chalkeinu imahem, and we want to be part of that schar as well. All these special people, that we should be included in that special merit, that special reward that you give, v'lo nevosh ki v'cha batachnu, that we believe in you. And now the next paragraph is ve, and also, right? What is the ve? What is the and? V'yushalayim ircha barachamim tashuv. So the way that it's interpreted, or one way that's interpreted is that we are going to build Yerushalayim. How are we going to build it? It's up to us to build it. It's up to great people to build Yerushalayim. The tzaddikim, Yerushalayim is not going to be built in a miraculous way. It's not going to come down from heaven. It's something that each of us have a part in, how to build Yerushalayim, how to make this place, this Yerushalayim, a place where the light of Hashem, the light of Torah, goes out to the entire world. And the Gemara says the following. I'm not sure if you ever heard, we have this concept, Yerushalayim shel Mala, Yerushalayim shel Mata, that there's a heavenly Jerusalem and there's a lower Jerusalem. They're the elevated one and the one that's grounded. So the Gemara says, the Gemara in Tainis says, Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu, says the Holy One, blessed be He, Lo avo b'Yerushalayim shel Mala, I will not enter the Yerushalayim above, Ad shavo the Yerushalayim shel Mata, until I enter the lower Yerushalayim, the grounded Yerushalayim, the Yerushalayim that we're living in right now. God says, I'm not going to that one until we build this great Yerushalayim here. So this idea of Yerushalayim, this idea of bringing a light from Yerushalayim to the entire world is something that is up to each and every one of us. That's what we say. It's the tzaddikim and the chasidim, and I include everybody in this room as being tzaddikim and being chasidim, that we're here, we're righteous. We are righteous. We've come to Israel. We live in Yerushalayim, or we live in Eretz Yisrael, or if we're visiting, we're here right now. We're tzaddikim. And how is Yerushalayim going to be built? The Yerushalayim. With these people. In other words, it's not something that's a mystical, there is maybe a mystical element, but God says, I'm not going to that place until this Yerushalayim is built, that we bring the light of Hashem to all of mankind. I'll conclude with the following. And this message that we have this unique mission and this role to bring goodness and blessing to the entire world. So where do we see that? Where do we find that? Again, is this like Rav Kook? Did he kind of come up with this idea? Is this Lubavitcher Rebbe? Where does this, it comes from Avraham Avinu. It's the very first words of Hashem to Avraham. We know that he's going to be called, we spoke about this a few weeks, Av Hamon Goyim, that who are you? You're the father of many nations, not you're the father of the Jewish people. Av Hamon, and you're going to have a change of name. That hey, what's the hey in Avraham that was added? Hamon. Av Hamon Goyim. You're going to be the father. I want you to be the light for all nations, not just for you. Your role is, your mission here is why you are here and why the Jewish people are here, is to change the world, is to transform the world, is to bring the light of God to the entire world. Av Hamon Goyim. And the very first words of Hashem to Avraham, Lech lecha me'artzecha, go from your land, go to the land of Israel, ve'escha l'goy gadol, ve'heyeh bracha, and you will be a blessing for the entire world. Nivrechu v'cha kol mishpachot hadama. That's pasuk Beis and pasuk Gimel. Right after God says to Avram, come to Israel, I want you to be ve'heyeh bracha, and you will be a blessing. You will be a blessing for all mankind. V'nivrechu v'cha kol mishpachot hadama. Where's the source for this? It's the first psukim of Lech Lecha. It's the first words of God to Avraham. V'nivrechu v'cha. And I'll just add the following. So what is the word, and you will be a blessing? Ve'yeh bracha, and you will be a blessing. What does that mean? So Rashi's grandson, who's known as the Rashbam. You don't have it on the page in front of you. Rashi's grandson, the Rashbam. How does he interpret the word bracha? How do we generally interpret bracha? Bracha means that you'll be a blessing to others. You'll be a blessing. I guess you'll be the model. You'll be the role model for everyone. You'll bring blessing, what you do in your life. But that's not what the Rashbam says. What does bracha mean? Lashon mavrich umarchiv. The word bracha means the following. It's a grafting or an integration. That's what the word bracha means. Lashon mavrich umarchiv, klomar yitarvu b'mishpachtecha mishpachot hadama. That together you will become yitarvu, arevut. Again, we usually think of kol Yisrael arevim zebazeh, and that's absolutely true, right? All of us are together in it, right? We're all connected to one another. But the word bracha, according to the Rashbam, doesn't mean you're going to be a blessing. You're going to create a unity with the nations of the world. There's going to be a unity of the nations of the world. And this is the way Rav Kook understands Beit Shammai. Beit Shammai's approach is that those candles go down until we're one. There's a lot of separation. There's a lot of pirud in the world, right? We're all different from one another, and there's a lot of even enmity and animosity, right, throughout the world. How do we get to a place that we're all one? How do we get to a place that we all believe in Hashem? And where is that? That's Beit HaMikdash. That's Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim is the combination of two words, the word yirah and shalem. It's a place of wholeness. It's a place of fear of God, where we know oneness of God, and we bring that wholeness to all of mankind. That's Yerushalayim. That's Beit HaMikdash. What is Chanukah? Chanukah is return to the Beit HaMikdash. It's cleansing the Beit HaMikdash. It's lighting that light, the Beit HaMikdash. And it's bringing that light of Beit HaMikdash to the entire world, to Or LaGoyim. And we bring the menorah outside of our homes. Again, I didn't grow up with this, but that's the halacha. And we're coming back to that today in Yerushalayim. If you walk in my neighborhood, people have their menorah outside their home. My next door neighbor actually built in the wall, right at the entrance of his home, a little shelf. It was part of the wall itself when he built his home. It's a stone shelf, and that's for those 8 nights. He puts the menorah there right at the entrance of his house. It's for everyone to see. It's a message for everyone. The menorah, we're coming back, Rav Kook says, we're coming back to doing the mitzvah right. 2,000 years, it's been in our windowsill, in our living room, wrong. It has to come outside. But more than that, we're getting back to our mission. Our mission as a people that we can fulfill for the very first time is to be a great people, to look at our army, to look at our morality, to look at who we are as a people, and to bring that to the entire world, and to transform the world with that light. And that's the light of the menorah. All right, I wish everyone I'll already say a Chanukah Sameach. We're 2 weeks away, but with this we can say Chanukah Sameach. Everyone's invited next week to be here. There's a special program, and I'll see you in 2 weeks' time, B'ezrat Hashem. Yes, please.